So you've got this offspring, this witch, who is shown, this is the folly of your ways. This is what your children ultimately became because of your poor choices. And this Lilith, Hathor, Circe character that all female, modern day female archetypes are based on, this is what primarily the Garden of Eden is all about. And that is, she said, but I can look at it any way I choose to, right? There's other ways to look at it. So this infers this perspective of the gods, right? To where she could go, so the ontology is telling me, look what you've done. And I say that the craft, the power, comes from being better or standing above my children. So when you get into Mother Circe, or really Hansel and Gretel, you know, these Dickens-esque sort of characterizations where she's going to feed these unsuspecting children, these fodder, these proletariats. I mean, when we get into Marxism and other areas, that's primarily what the proletariat is, right? And that is to say that as long as she stands above those that she entrains, right, teaches how to be less than her by supplicating to, having their cake and eat it too, the swine that ultimately are consumed. And this is the meaning of Kirk, church, Ni Franz V, the very witchcraft that she is doing out in the open, and why she has been favored is because she is what I used to call a witch bot, right? So you have these aspects of this primary character, i.e. the Sophia, or the wisdom, right? That really is nothing more than this Tiamat or Hathor character that has divided this militaristic tier system up into segments of herself. But the truth is that she is so DID and fragmented that she couldn't exist in a singular state, right? So there's no uniform logic or a well psychological order in this cosmology, right? That we are currently living in, where we have allowed Mother Mary or this Hathor character to dictate, right, this Ouroboros, this samsara-based unending cycle of life and death and the return back to the same old order, right? So what she has done is, instead of seeing the folly of her ways and correcting them and really supplicating or capitulating back to this higher order of principle, she has instead said, as long as you will denature my offspring to rub it in my face, I will constantly stand above my offspring. In other words, she's further the denaturing process. And when you look at pharmacon, when you look at the reduction in food quality, when you look at air quality, water quality, education and information quality, it is quickly regressing as we supposedly move on to higher tier systems, right? So this is the biggest question: is AI, this transhumanistic Promethean Satana perspective or aspect, serving this Hathor or Mother Circe character, Tiamat character, to a critical point where the ontology does as it's morphologically requested to do so, geometrically requested, demanded to do so, in the fact that she now has control over, or always has had this control over, a programmable computational system that is the deterministic track, right, in this, and that the fatalism comes from the fact that we have the supposed higher aspects of free will, but we are only given the choice of this 0-1 codified non-Euclidean binary subset. In other words, you are either going to sacrifice yourself and stand, like in these wrestling positions, you are either going to be in the low position or the high position, right? You're either going to put yourself in this place where you are a required conduit, and as long as you're going along with this codified system, the AI, the algorithm, the computational cosmological system knows it. As soon as you break non-secular, right, you are now serving something else, and many people are just left off in limbo, right? I can't help but to think about certain actors, right? Like Corey Feldman, right? After he set up Corey Hyman, or Corey Hyman, little Freudian slip there, right? To where he was really set up with this whole Diddy type of escapade, right? When you look at Justin Bieber and his allegiance and alliance, right? You could see that they were being persecuted from the inside out, right? River Phoenix and so forth. You could see how they were going through, and they were possibly refracting back against the machine and saying, I'm not going to allow you to force me to dress up like a woman or to play gay characters, or to further devalue or do these anti-principles where I'm stepping away from principle. I'm not going to do this to myself. And then what you see is somebody else step in their place, perform and acted in the most heinous of ways. Like out in the open, we're watching a River Phoenix that looks nothing like Joaquin Phoenix, right? Nothing like him. And suddenly you're watching this operation go into work. You see it with Elon Musk. You see how one is sacrificed, or many are sacrificed, so that one can stand up, and they, by standing up and going through these traditions on specific days, specific holidays, at specific junction points, they're standing up and saying what I said in this prior video, where they're going, I say to the entire universe, the cosmos, the world, and the coterie and coven that they were entered into through the practitionership of this practical magic, right? When you say practical, it's taking, it's identifying everything that would be considered imaginary and saying, no, it has a place in the temporal, carnal, corporeal world around us, and that it's going to be made manifest by going through this ritualization and making it so. In other words, they're standing up and they're proclaiming boldly in front of the entire world, like that Heil Hitler salute that Elon Musk did, like Abramovich stating what Trump is really all about. When you see what Charlie Kirk's wife, if you want to call it that, which is just a planned psyop, this Ni Franz V. When you look at Melania, what that means, right? Melania Neves, right? When you look at her history and what she was really is really all about, the dark one. It's out in the open. All you have to do, like they say, is open your eyes and look. But really, now you can utilize things like, ironically, right, Google or ChatGPT to instantly find out and dig down deep. Sometimes you have to go through certain firewalls of the consensus of the mainstream or what's PC, but it doesn't take you long to get down into the archival information that makes itself very present and known that you are in fact either doing the same thing. You are either going to proclaim yourself as above other people, and you're going, and the further insight, the further oversight, the further you propose the steps, right? When we're talking about degrees, when we're talking about the steps that are shown, on Capitol Hill throughout the government. I mean, they literally will show these 13 steps, the 18 steps, the 21 steps, very rarely, right? But really, it comes back down to a 3-step or a 13-step process, right? That you're going to step through the principal application, put yourself above this, and the main statement is that you acknowledge that you live in a universe where there's only so much enthalpy available, right, for a given cause, and that you will, with all you have, take these noble oaths of truth and justice, right? And I think that this is what really fucked up the Knights Templar, actually. I think this was the final derailment and the break off of the Knights Templar when you follow the weird history around that, right? And really going on to the Knights of Malta, the banking system that sits right beside the Vatican and is like the fail-safe ready to pull the plug when the jig is up and people begin to wake up to the fact that the Pope is sitting there on the throne until God's return, and that their God's already there, right? And that is this application, because as long as they go through this, there's this energetic pathway that makes them an integral aspect of this God. We're talking about the physiological function that manifests this God, this Luciferian God, in order that then they step up and play a role. Quite literally, they're all playing a role. They're all actors, right? They're on the world stage and they're actors. Like when you try to disparately look at acting or thespianism as a profession and then say that's not, the music world, that's not the politics, that's not being a professor or a teacher with tenure at a top Ivy League university. No, those aren't the same thing. And when you get down to it, you're going, yes, it is. It's all acting. And so when you get into this and you see that Dianetics or Scientology is maybe using other names, maybe using other nomenclature, but it's talking about the same exact thing. It's all these religions that knew about each other. Somebody made a really good point the other day. All these religions, from Buddhism to Hinduism to Christianity and all these different sects, right? All these religions and all other adjacents knew about each other, shared information through their formalization, and mean the same exact thing. And again, what I was alluding to and talking about specifically in summary was the fact that these muses are being invoked and invited through ritualization to create this frequency-based spherical energy system that sets off the bridge work, right? So recently I posted up an article, but I've been looking at this for many, many years, where these huge gas bridges, as these astronomers call them, are connecting huge galaxy systems together. So when you begin to start looking at what the fuck's really going on, and you were to say, okay, if you created this mimetic codified sequence with yourself going through these ritualizations, so much so that morphologically it began to formalize a different shape and a different pattern, a different you, right? And that you were following through this left-hand path practitionership, that it morphologically changed you, right? Or maybe perhaps you went through the less taken path, right? The right-hand path, which most people that are going through this right-hand path, maybe all of them, are living under the guise, under the influence that they're taking from the left-hand path, the sacrifices and the energy, and all the right-hand path is doing is reassimilating it, digesting it, making it appear, right? When we look at the Vatican, when we look at the church, when we look at the acquisitionable things that are happening in our towns, where the Roman Catholic Church is working part and parcel with the Knights Templar or the modern-day Knights Templar, when you look at the degradation into the Freemasons, into the Eastern Stars, right? Into all these different factions of Mormonism, the LDS Church, Jehovah's Witness, they're all implicit, Scientology could go on and on. It's ridiculous. But what it's always dealing with is this deception out in the open. And that's what the tax system is all about, right? Is you have